Welcome to Working for Women, the Independent Women's Forum podcast, where we are changing the conversation about women and public policy for the better.
Hello, my name is Carrie Lucas, president of the Independent Women's Forum. Today, net neutrality rules expire. That means that putting an end to Obama-era regulations on the internet. Now, you may have seen headlines a lot about this. A lot has been made of net neutrality, and people are scared, not sure what this means in terms of internet freedom. And so here with me today, I'm so excited to have IWF's Senior Policy Analyst, Patrice Onwuka, and she's going to explain what the end of net neutrality really means. Patrice, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, it's always a pleasure.
This week, there is an end to the net neutrality regulations that were put in place by the Obama administration, and now there's headlines in the New York Times and Washington Post that are really suggesting that this is that people have a lot to be worried about. So can you first kind of give us a background on what net neutrality is and how we got to this position?
Sure. So net neutrality, in really simple terms, are regulations on how companies who give us our internet access, how they operate. They were passed in 2015 under President Obama's administration. And the idea is that every person should have equal access to the internet, to content on the internet. And that companies like broadband companies, think of your Verizon or your Comcast, that they can't do things when it comes to business. Like they can't, throttle or block certain content that comes to your phone or your computer. There are also rules around ensuring that they can't allow certain people to pay more for faster access. They call them fast lanes, so to speak. And then the rules really, though, gave a lot of regulatory power to the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. Now, before that, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, really was the federal agency that had oversight in this area when it came to anti-competitive practices by businesses and ensuring that there are privacy rules for consumers. So you had this new FCC under the Obama administration pretty much take power and control over the internet and considering it kind of like a utility to be able to do so. And so now you've got these new rules that are in place. And so the new Trump administration with the new FCC chairman under Ajit Pai said, hey, wait a minute. The internet was free and open before 2015. And under that light regulatory approach, the internet flourished. We got YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. People can sell on Etsy and Amazon and build Instagram fortunes without any sort of government regulation. So why do we need it? And so that's where the FCC under the Trump administration said, let's repeal these rules and let's go back to a lighter regulatory touch. And that's what we're seeing today.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's a really important point. This idea that we're going back to an era that wasn't that long ago. Now, were there real examples? Like, were there problems with people kind of discriminating against some content that motivated the Obama era rules? What was the impetus for it? Did they have to crack down on some bad behavior?
Well, that's the interesting part. There really weren't any examples of harm done to consumers. This is really more of a preemptive strategy to ensure that in the future, companies wouldn't do anything like throttle content or block certain content. And let's just put this in some context, Carrie. I mean, we're talking about your Comcast and your Verizon to provide that internet access to homes and phones. And then you've got the internet companies who create a ton of content. Think of your YouTube videos, your Facebook posts, your Twitter, and your Instagram. So they're actually creating platforms for people to create lots of content. Well, as some of these broadband companies start to get into the business of creating content like movies and television, I think there's fear on the part of some internet companies that, hey, wait a minute, maybe the access to my websites will suddenly be blocked or maybe have lesser priority. But we still haven't had any examples of that happen. So this is really, like I said, just a preemptive strike or a way to head that off. that doesn't necessarily mean that now that the internet net neutrality is gone, that we're going to see this at all. I actually think it's not a smart business move for companies, broadband companies, to do any of these practices, because the heat will be on them.
Yeah, no. So if you're somebody, let's say you're a woman running a small business on Etsy or through Amazon or something like that, or was your world changed today? What does this mean for you? The fact that the net neutrality is gone. Did they have new concerns, or is it something they have to do differently?
No, you're actually, I mean, I woke up this morning, I checked Facebook and Twitter, I logged on with no problems, I had no delays, and most people will probably not have any delays related to the end of net neutrality rules. Now, if they didn't pay their bills, that's another story. But there was really no change. Exactly, there's really no change that we're expecting to see. Now, the end of net neutrality rules, the 2015 rules, doesn't mean that there's going to be no regulation at all. What the FCC has done, though, is that they've implemented their own kind of it's called the Restoring Internet Freedom Order. And that just simply says they're going back to a lighter regulatory touch, where they're giving back control and oversight on companies back to the FTC, where it originally was. And really the FTC is the privacy cop, so to speak, for consumers. That's where you can actually get some sort of remedy in case there are examples of companies blocking or throttling. The FCC also, as part of their order, says that companies do, if they engage in any sort of practices, have to disclose that, and they can open themselves obviously up for fines and penalties if they do. So, as a consumer or as a producer, as a seller on Etsy, you shouldn't have to worry about anything today or tomorrow with the repeal and the end of net neutrality.
Okay, yeah, that's good to hear. Now, is this obviously this is partially this change, as you said, this is due to a new administration. Is there anything? Do people have to worry that net neutrality is going to come back? Is there something that Congress could do, or is there something that another administration could bring back? What do you think the future looks like when it comes to this specific regulation?
Well, now here's the funny part. While the FCC's net neutrality rules are dead, this is not the end of the story. At the federal level, I think this is really where Congress can come into play. And there have been some bills floating around Congress that would kind of enshrine in law that there should be certain protections for consumers when it comes to internet access. We haven't seen anything passed, though, in law in Congress. So really, this is the purview of Congress to decide what an open and free internet should look like and how you achieve that. And we may see some movement on that, not certain. The really big battles, though, are going to occur in the courtroom and in the states. We've got a couple of pending federal cases, including one that's hopefully the Supreme Court will take up this issue. That's what some proponents of net neutrality want, for the Supreme Court to weigh in and preserve these rules. So we'll see if that happens. The states also. You've seen states, about 29 states have introduced legislation to protect certain parts of net neutrality in their state. And we have a few states that actually have passed net neutrality rules they've enacted some executive orders. So states like New Jersey and New York and Hawaii, for example. I think we'll continue to see this issue bubble up at the state level. But I want to bring in just like the political aspect of this. I think we see progressives and people on the left who think this is a really good mobilizing issue to get millennials to the polls in 2018. So you will continue to hear about net neutrality, the repeal of it, and what it means. I do think, though, the proof is in the pudding. And if people's lives continue as usual, and you can get on Facebook and Instagram just like you always did with no issues, then it's going to be really hard to explain why we actually needed these rules in the first place.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting, and you're right. The new era starts today, and so we will see if these regulations were really necessary. Well, Patricia, thank you so much for breaking down this complicated issue and putting some of those unfounded fears in context and giving people a little bit of reassurance. I'll remind people there's a new blog. Patrice just wrote a great blog at IWF.org. It's called Net Neutrality Ends Today. Here's why it's not the end of the world. So thank you so much for that, Patrice. To our listeners, thanks for joining us. Share this with your friends, and don't forget to like and rate this podcast on iTunes so others can discover our conversations. And don't forget to check IWF.org for more background issues and analysis. Come to IWF.org, where all issues are women's issues.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please give it a thumbs up, share it on social media, or stop by IWF.org for similar content.